garage smelled like dust and time. But when Darren lifted that box, the scent shifted. Not mold, not garbage, something else. Inside the box was a plastic bag. Inside the bag was death. Small, cold, wrapped like trash. And this was just the beginning. What police discovered next would uncover 7 hidden babies, all murdered by the same woman, a mother, who gave birth in silence and then killed. Megan Huntsman was born in 1975 in the heart of Utah, a state known for its clean-cut values, tight-knit communities, and deep religious roots. It's the kind of place where the grass is trimmed, neighbors wave from across the street, and the appearance of a good life often matters more than the truth behind closed doors. From a young age, Megan blended in. She wasn't loud, she didn't rebel. There were no early warning signs, no criminal record, no acts of violence, no screams for help. She was the kind of girl teachers described as quiet, polite, forgettable even. And maybe that was the first red flag. She disappeared into the background so easily. Like many girls from small towns with big expectations, Megan married young. She was still a teenager when she became Megan West, the wife of Darren West, a construction worker with a tough job and a tougher personality. Their marriage seemed ordinary enough, rough around the edges, but nothing outside the bounds of normal. They moved into a modest home in Pleasant Grove. Nothing flashy, nothing suspicious. Just a beige house on a quiet street with a trimmed lawn and a single-car garage. They had 3 daughters, took family photos, hosted backyard barbecues, attended the occasional church service. To outsiders, it looked like your standard lower-middle-class American family, trying to make it work. But Pleasant Grove is the kind of town where people keep their distance, politely, where you don't pry into your neighbor's business, where silence can stretch for years. And that silence is exactly where Megan's secrets thrived. Behind that white picket fence, everything was falling apart. Both Megan and Darren began using methamphetamine. What started as a thrill, or maybe a way to escape, quickly became a dependency. Meth doesn't just ruin your body, it dismantles your sense of reality, trust, empathy. The drug took over their lives like a parasite. Their marriage, once merely strained, became toxic. There were arguments that neighbors overheard, but didn't report. Separations that were temporary, reconciliations that were fragile. Megan's health deteriorated, her weight dropped, her eyes became hollow. But in a town like Pleasant Grove, these things happen quietly. People notice and look away. Eventually, Darren was arrested and sentenced to federal prison for meth-related crimes. He left behind a broken home, a damaged marriage, and 3 daughters who had grown used to chaos. With Darren gone, Megan was left alone in that house. And this is where the story shifts from tragic to unthinkable. Because now, Megan didn't have to hide the worst parts of herself anymore. She no longer had to explain her absences, her swelling belly, her strange moods, or her late-night isolation. There was no one left to question her. No husband, no friends, no one close enough to notice the slow, quiet horror that was about to unfold, one baby at a time. The drugs numbed her, the isolation protected her, and the silence of that house became a shield, a womb of its own, cold, dark, secret. And in that silence, Megan did something that most people can't even imagine. She gave birth, alone, without a doctor, and then she made sure that no one, not a single soul, would ever hear that baby cry. How do you carry life inside you, knowing you'll end it the moment it begins? How do you walk through a house full of children, knowing you're building coffins, one birth at a time? Between 1996 and 2006, Megan Huntsman was pregnant 7 times, 7 pregnancies, 7 babies. And not once did anyone raise a single alarm. Not her husband, not her parents, not her friends, not even the 3 daughters already living under her roof. No one noticed the swelling of her belly. No one questioned the weight gain or the weight loss or the days she stayed in bed, because Megan had learned how to vanish in plain sight. She wore oversized sweatshirts, layered her clothes, kept to herself, blamed the drugs, the depression, the exhaustion, and no one dared to ask more. In truth, no one wanted to know. When the time came, she didn't go to a hospital. There were no emergency calls, no maternity wards, no doctors, no birth certificate, no footprints stamped in ink, just silence. She delivered the babies herself, alone, in her bathroom or bedroom. She would labor through the pain in absolute quiet, no screams, no cries, just clenched teeth and cold towels. And then, as the tiny body slipped from her, she killed. No hesitation, no panic, no remorse. Some she strangled with her bare hands, others she smothered with a towel. Methods varied, the outcome never did. She didn't cradle them, didn't speak to them, didn't name them. These weren't babies to her, they were problems to erase, quickly, completely. Each infant was cleaned, wrapped in a towel or placed inside a plastic bag, then sealed inside a cardboard box. The boxes were taped shut and stacked neatly in the garage. A garage that was full of ordinary things. Christmas decorations, dusty toys, family photos. A garage where her daughters played hide and seek. A garage where for over a decade, 7 murdered newborns were stored like forgotten junk. And still, no one saw, no one smelled, no one questioned the sealed boxes gathering dust. It wasn't just one mischance. It was years of missed moments. Every time someone knocked on that door and Megan didn't answer. Every time she avoided a neighbor, skipped a family gathering, turned away from a conversation. That was a baby dying in silence. This wasn't one tragic event. It was a decade-long system of murder, calculated, private, and chillingly consistent. Megan wasn't out of control. She wasn't acting in bursts of madness. This was a process, a ritual of disposal that she repeated over and over without being caught. And while the town of Pleasant Grove hummed with small talk and lawnmowers and church bells, a house just like theirs was becoming a crypt. She wasn't hiding in the woods. She wasn't fleeing across state lines. She was there, shopping for groceries, driving her kids to school, smiling in family photos, and stacking corpses in the garage. The world looked at Megan Huntsman and saw a struggling mom, a little lost, a little worn down, but harmless. And because people saw what they wanted to see, 7 babies never got to live past their first. What do you do when your home becomes a graveyard? What do you say when the mother of your children turns out to be a serial killer of her own babies? It was April 12th, 2014, a quiet Saturday in Pleasant Grove, Utah. Darren West had just returned home after years in federal prison. He'd served his time for meth distribution. Broken, sober, and trying to rebuild what was left of his life, he stepped back into the house he used to share with Megan Huntsman, the same house where they raised their daughters. But now, Megan didn't live there. She visited from time to time, sure, but that house, it was hers only in history. Now it was Darren's turn to clean up the mess she left behind. Literally. The garage was chaos, stacked high with cardboard boxes, old clothes, furniture, holiday junk no one had touched in years. A decade of dust coated every surface. And beneath it all, something worse was waiting. He reached for a heavy box. It was oddly sealed, tightly taped, too careful for Christmas lights or baby clothes. As he dragged it down, the weight shifted unnaturally, dense, uneven, and then came the smell, a sour, rotting stench that didn't belong in a garage full of memories. Darren opened the box. Inside, wrapped in a plastic bag, was a tiny body, pale, still, lifeless. Not a doll, not an animal. A dead baby. He stumbled backward, gagging, shaking. The world spun sideways. Somehow he managed to dial 911. When officers arrived, Darren couldn't speak in full sentences. He was incoherent, pale as a ghost, pointing at the box, whispering only 2 words. There's more. The garage became a crime scene within minutes. Yellow tape, cameras, gloves, evidence markers. And then they opened the second box, and the third, and the fourth. Each one told the same story. A newborn, wrapped, bagged, preserved, hidden in silence. 7 bodies, 7 dead infants, all born in secret, all murdered, all left to rot less than 10 feet from where her daughters used to play. Veteran officers, people who had seen stabbings, shootings, suicides, stood frozen. Some dropped to their knees, others vomited, one broke down in tears. One of the detectives later said, "This isn't something you see in law enforcement. This isn't something you recover from." They weren't just investigating a murder scene. They had stumbled into a mass grave built box by box over a decade by a mother. Megan was arrested the next day. When officers questioned her, she didn't cry. She didn't panic. She simply said, "I was too addicted to care. I didn't want to deal with the babies." No emotion, no grief, just an exhausted confession. She admitted to killing 6 babies. The 7th, she claimed it was stillborn, but that was a lie. The autopsy later proved all 7 infants had been born healthy, full term, viable. They could have lived, should have lived. And she killed them, one by one, coldly, quietly, and then stacked their tiny corpses in cardboard boxes like forgotten toys. It had all been happening for years, while the world went on, while neighbors waved hello, while her daughters grew up in the same house, never realizing they were playing above sealed coffins. There were no gunshots, no screams, no blood on the walls. But the horror, it was absolute, because nothing shakes a town like the quiet discovery that evil had been living right next door. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She didn't ask why she was being arrested. Megan Huntsman already knew, and worse, she didn't care. The day after the infant bodies were discovered, Megan was arrested at her boyfriend's house in Pleasant Grove. She didn't resist. She didn't even look surprised, as if she had been expecting this moment for years. When officers read her rights, she barely blinked. No questions, no emotion, just silence. At the station, detectives sat across from her in a small gray room, a table, a recorder, and the weight of 7 murdered children pressing down like a storm cloud. Then Megan opened her mouth and confessed. Not slowly, not with shame, but calmly, flatly, like she was talking about someone else's life. "I killed them," she said, "between 1996 and 2006. The officers leaned in. They needed details, names, motives, something human. She explained the pattern. She'd get pregnant, hide it, give birth alone, then end the baby's life within minutes. No hesitation, no second thoughts. She admitted to strangling or suffocating 6 of the infants. One, she claimed, was stillborn. But forensic reports later confirmed the truth. All 7 were born healthy. When asked why, her voice didn't shake. "I didn't want to deal with the babies," she said. "I was too messed up on drugs. That was it. No guilt, no breakdown, just the cold math of convenience." The detectives asked how she kept it hidden. Megan said she wore baggy clothes. She avoided people. She gave birth in secret, usually in a bathroom. She cleaned the blood herself, wrapped the babies in towels, then placed them in boxes, taped them shut, and pushed them to the back of the garage. When asked if she ever considered giving the babies away, she shook her head. "No, I just wanted it over." She never looked up, never cried, not once. The officers, many of them parents themselves, were stunned. They had interviewed killers before, gang members, jealous spouses, drug dealers, but never a mother who murdered her own newborns and spoke about it like it meant nothing. Megan said she did it alone. No one helped, not even her husband, Darren. He didn't know, she said. No one did. Police believed her. Her addiction to meth was severe. She said the drug controlled her, that it made her cold, that she couldn't think like a mother anymore, only like a user. And when the babies came, they were obstacles, burdens she didn't want. But meth alone didn't explain everything. 7 times she made the same choice. 7 times she gave birth in silence. And 7 times she took a life that had barely begun. She never gave the children names, never held them longer than she had to, never buried them. She just hid the bodies and moved on. And for 10 years, she lived with that secret, not in hiding, but in plain sight. She went to church, she attended family events, she smiled in photos, all while knowing there were tiny corpses stacked like boxes in her garage. No one suspected her, not until Darren opened the first one. When detectives finished questioning her, there were no final words, no apology, no breakdown, just paperwork. Megan signed her confession, quiet, still, as if she had finally put down a weight she had been carrying for too long. But the truth? She didn't seem relieved. She seemed empty. One officer said afterward, she showed less emotion than people do when confessing to stealing a car. Another whispered, she had death in her eyes, but not the kind you fear, the kind that's already done feeling anything. She was a woman who erased her own children and barely blinked while admitting it. The courtroom was silent, not out of respect, but disbelief. No one could understand how a mother had done this, or how she could stand there with nothing in her eyes. In July 2014, Megan Huntsman appeared in court, charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder. 1 infant, she insisted, had been stillborn. The other 6, she admitted killing them. She walked into the courtroom in handcuffs, head down, wearing a bulletproof vest, not for her protection from the guards, but from the public. People in town were furious. Some wanted her dead. Inside, the families of victims, her own family, sat behind her. Darren West, her ex-husband, the man who had unknowingly lived with the bodies of his own children for years, stared straight ahead. He never spoke. He didn't have to. His face said everything. Megan pleaded guilty. No trial, no fight, She accepted the charges in the same calm, cold tone she'd used in her confession. The judge asked if she understood what she had done. She nodded once. When the prosecutor spoke, the room shifted. His voice cracked. He said, "These weren't crimes of passion. They were decisions. Over and over again. 7 babies, 1 woman, no soul." Photos of the garage were shown. 7 small boxes, each labeled in police evidence bags. Grown men cried. Reporters turned away. Then came the sentencing. Megan stood up. She was offered a chance to speak. She said only this, "I'm sorry. I was in a dark place. I can't fix it." No tears, no full apology, just a few dry words. Her voice sounded tired, not sorry. The judge stared at her. He didn't speak right away. Then he said, "The depth of this crime is almost beyond understanding. You were a mother. You were supposed to protect. Instead, you became the threat." He sentenced her to 6 terms of 5 years to life, to be served consecutively. That means she'll never leave prison, not unless a miracle happens. And for her, there will be none. After the sentence, she was led away quietly. No outburst, no reaction, just the same empty look. The courtroom exhaled, but no one felt better. Justice had been served, but 7 tiny lives were still gone. No verdict could undo that. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. One journalist called it one of the darkest stories in Utah's history. Another said, "Evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers from behind closed doors." For the town of Pleasant Grove, nothing felt the same again. The house was still there, the garage, the memories. People kept asking the same question, how did no one notice? But that answer would never come, and the silence Megan had lived in became the silence everyone else was left with. What happens when a mother kills in silence and leaves her daughters to live in the echo? What happens when a home becomes a coffin and no one ever knew? Megan Huntsman is now just a number inside the Utah State Prison. 6 life sentences, no parole, no more freedom. She was locked away in 2015, and she'll never walk out again. No interviews, no apologies, no sign of regret. She exists behind concrete and steel, while the world tries to forget the name it once couldn't believe. But behind her, she didn't just leave boxes, she left daughters. 3 girls who lived in that house their entire lives, never realizing their mother was killing their siblings, one by one. They had played in the garage, they had walked past the boxes, they had grown up surrounded by death and never once knew it. What does that do to a child? How do you survive that kind of truth? After the discovery, Child Protective Services stepped in immediately. The girls were removed, protected, and placed with relatives. Most details about their lives since have been sealed, and they should be. The public doesn't need to see their scars. What matters is this: they were victims too, not of murder, but of silence. And somehow they survived. They kept living after the truth came out. They kept breathing after finding out the woman who raised them had buried 7 of their siblings in boxes just feet away. That kind of pain doesn't fade, it just hides. But those girls, they endured it. And that's not weakness, that's strength. The house still stood for years, quiet, ordinary. From the outside, it was just another Utah home, modest, worn, and forgettable. But inside, it had been a tomb. Neighbors later said they felt sick just looking at it. Some cried. One woman said, "We had barbecues, birthday parties, and church events, and all that time, the babies were right there in that garage." Another said, "I thought we lived on a safe street, but I was wrong." That garage became a symbol of blindness, of horror, of missed chances. For a decade, it had held death, carefully wrapped and stacked beside holiday decorations. The innocence of that neighborhood cracked the moment the police opened that first box. And still, the most haunting part of it all wasn't just what Megan did, it was what everyone else didn't do. 7 pregnancies, no doctor visits, no birth records, no funeral services, no questions. People saw her gain weight, saw her vanish indoors, saw her change, but no one spoke up. Not her husband, not her friends, not even her parents. The silence wasn't just hers, it was shared. That's why this story doesn't leave you. Because it reminds you how evil doesn't always look like a monster. It doesn't always come with blood or screams. Sometimes it cooks dinner, kisses its children goodnight, says grace at the table, and walks past 7 tiny bodies without blinking. Megan didn't scream her crimes, she whispered them, and nobody heard. So now, the house is still there, but it's not a home anymore. It's a scar A quiet place that holds the memory of lives that never got to begin. Pleasant Grove will never forget. The children at school will grow up hearing the story. The town itself has a shadow now, and it will never fully fade. Megan Huntsman's legacy isn't just about death. It's about what happens when we stop noticing, when we stop asking, when silence becomes normal. And that's what she left behind. Megan Huntsman's story is a haunting reminder that sometimes the darkest horrors hide in plain sight. If this story shocked you, don't stay silent. Share it so others learn to look closer. Subscribe now for more true crime stories that reveal the hidden truths lurking beneath the surface. Until next time, stay aware and stay safe.